Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I just want to thank everyone for joining us for the webinar today. It's Anchoring Adult Student Retention Insights from a Professional Learning Community. Today we have with us Jen Denton and Charlie Weeks. I do want to thank them and Essential Ed for always being our great partners. They're going to be joining us again at the COABE conference, so stop by their booth and say hello. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jen and Charlie.
Thank you so much. We are so happy to be here today. We're just going to say hello on camera for a little bit, and then we're going to go behind some slides because today's focus really is on this wonderful professional development community that we have had with us over the last 12 months, preparing for and in progress for over the last 18 months. So I'm already seeing a lot of them here joining us there in the chat. So we're going to let that focus be on them today, their findings. We're going to tell you a little bit about how this group came to be. Charlie's going to be here with me, and he is going to be throwing out some questions in the chat, allowing you guys some interaction there too. So take advantage of that. We hope that you'll be active there in that chat. So I am going to go off camera and share my screen. All right, so as we got that wonderful introduction today, we are talking about insights from our professional learning community. We titled today's session, Anchoring Adult Student Retention, and we're gonna kind of define that and flesh that out a little bit as we go. But this has really been probably definitely for me, one of the biggest educator co-op cohesive things that we have had the opportunity, and I use that word very intentionally, to do here at Essential Education. I've made a pretty bold statement that it's probably one of the most fulfilling things that I've ever been able to be a part of. So we want to give you some insight into what that group was, how it came to be, and some general findings for this big focus on adult student retention. So when you think of adult student retention, I'm sure you can think of a lot of adjectives that come to mind. So you can pop some of those in the chat. I'm sure we all know what some of those adjectives are because this is a common problem in adult education. It's something I think that we all battle to some degree. We've all got different aspects of it that we face in our classrooms or in our programs. And so we kind of just asked some of these big questions, like what are your big questions about adult student retention? We got some adjectives coming in there: challenging, frustrating, tricky, turbulent. Oh, I like that one. Sporadic. That's another one. We often hear that proverbial revolving door. Barriers, puzzling. Scott, it's interesting that you said that, puzzling, because adult student retention does bring up a lot of questions. You know, we might ask just a basic question like, why aren't students coming to class? That then might ask us to then look at the whole program and see, okay, well, if students aren't coming to class, are they staying in the program? Are they leaving the program? Which then kind of ask these more universal questions. What's going on? What is causing this? And then the real question, how can it be stopped? And it's one of the things that we knew at Essential Education is that kind of universal problem that as steeped in adult education as Essential Education is, we knew that this was going to be an undertaking that we simply could not work on alone. And we shouldn't be working on it alone. And one of the first things that we had to dispel within our professional development community was answering this question: what am I doing wrong? And that's a hard question to ask, and it's a hard question to answer. I think, and you can tell us in chat whether you've actually thought that in your head or you've voiced it out loud. I think that was a question that a lot of students, educators brought to the table is, if I'm really honest, I want to know what I'm doing wrong. And it allowed us to have some really big transparency as we worked together to help. So that's really why we started this professional learning community in partnership with COABE. They have just been hands down a fantastic partner across the board. They agreed to join with us in our efforts to come alongside us to sponsor what then would become the final piece of this program. And that is that they offered to credential everyone who finished this year-long initiative. And when I say initiative, it was lengthy and it was involved. They agreed to credential our now newly named adult student retention specialist. And so all of these folks joined together to collaborate and connect. And collaborate we did, and connect we did. Hypothesize and test. We looked at all of our various classrooms and all of their diversity. We began by looking at demographics, and we started to put together some ideas. Some of you have already thrown them out in the chat. But what are the big problems? Is transportation a problem? Is childcare a problem? Well, what are we really doing to kind of see what these things are? And we knew that was going to require some experimentation. And post that experimentation, we were going to need to reflect on that. We were going to need to evaluate that. And then we were going to need to be good, bad, everything in between, be able to share what we found, be able to then support each other with ideas, with a way to move forward, and then put some of those ideas into practice. And then this element, to then return to that, to evaluate how those efforts went, positive, negative, anywhere in between, and then get back to the drawing board and repeat it again. So this kind of became the heart of what this professional learning community became. We had about 50 educators that joined in for the bulk of our work. And we looked at what became the bigger questions of adult student retention. We have all those kind of, broad questions there in the beginning, hammering in on the what am I doing wrong? What am I missing? What is going on? What is causing this revolving door? But one of the first things we realized is we weren't necessarily asking the right questions. What did we need to do? What questions did we need to be asking to get to the heart of why students are not continuing to attend class, why they are exiting programs? So we started asking questions like this: who are our students? And I think before you answer that question too quickly, I'll ask it to you. Who are your students? Think about that. Do you know your students beyond their names? Do you know at least one family member that your student has by their name? Do you know what they do, what they want to do? What are their goals? Knowing our students became a really, really big question, as well as what do our students need to learn? Because we know that that answer is different for each and every one of those very diverse students. Where do our students learn best? And what type of environment do we need to create? An environment that retains, an environment that welcomes students, a program overall that welcomes students. What does that look like? What characteristics help to shape that? We needed to look at how to better understand our students in being in connection and in relationship with them. That's something we toss around a lot, but we didn't have a whole lot of, hey, what does that look like when we put that into practice? So we wanted to answer that question. We wanted to ask, why do our students want to learn? Getting back to that universal, what do you want to do from here? What do you want your idea of success to be? What does that look like? Because it's different. It's different for each of those students. It's different for each of their learning needs. What those goals, what success looks like for them is different, largely based on interest. And we need to know what that is. We need to have at least a minimum level pulse on that. And then when can we best support our students? And that when question really became something that we internalized as a group to say, well, I need to be able to address and equip and support my students whenever they need me to. So I need to be ready for that. I need to equip myself with the tools and the skills to do that. And that, thankfully, is one of the things that we were able to get a glimpse of together and start to work on together. So here from the beginning, I want to address why we have labeled these 6 retention anchors. And the answer to that is we started to look at diving deeper into each of these 6 questions. And as we did, we saw 6 really big anchors. And we created kind of this idea of if your retention was a ship and that ship pulled into port, you would want to make sure that it was secure in the harbor. And the answer to one of these questions might give you an anchor, but you're still going to dip to one side or the other. So let's say you have a couple of anchors. I answer a couple of these questions. I start to put some initiatives together to better meet students in this need, whatever that might be. And I've got 2 anchors, but I'm still rocking a little bit. I'm still not necessarily weathering that storm as much as I could if I put multiple aspects into play. If I put multiple anchors, things that we're going to ground and found this program or your classroom, whatever that looks like. And so we really focused on 6 different elements, knowing right off the bat that not the answer to one of these things is that proverbial magic pill. And that even that 6 answers to all of these things, even these 6 answers are not that proverbial magic pill, but it gets us a start. We get to start those conversations and we get to start that exploration and that implementation. So that's what we did. We started here at the beginning as a baseline with looking at the demographics of who the adult student is. We looked at 7 different characteristics of adult learners, knowing that adult learners are diverse, knowing that adult learners are busy. They've got busy, active lives. They're juggling multiple things. Adult learners need to tap into that personal experience to ground their learning and solidify what they're learning. Adult learners are uniquely motivated, going back to that why. What is it that they want to do down the road that you are helping to support them in? You're helping them to fulfill. We know that adult learners enjoy control over their learning. They want a little bit of autonomy. They want that level of expectation. We know that adult learners are results oriented, and this became a really big talking point as we looked at the difference in the motivating factors behind performance versus progress. And we had a great discussion there. That adult learning is slower but deeper. One of the most valuable things you can convince your students of is, yes, it might take you a little bit longer to get there, but once you do, you've got this personal experience to tap into. You've got these incredible motivators, and that learning then is going to be so much deeper. So what we allowed our professional learning community to do was to choose one of these elements to really, really do a deep dive and focus on within their classrooms and within their programs. We were blessed to have a wonderful mix of both teachers and administrators within our group. And so they took a lot of different angles and looked at a lot of different aspects. And I love this quote that came out of some of the research that our group did. The more we know about adult learners, the barriers they face, and how these barriers interfere with their learning, the better we can structure classroom experiences that engage all learners and stimulate both personal growth and reflection. And I'm keeping an eye on the chat there, my peripheral vision. This word engagement has come up quite a bit. How do we get to the heart of that? How do we engage them? How do we give them something that makes them want to return? And so our group really dove into these 6 different characteristics. I guess one of the questions I'll throw out there in chat, and Charlie, you might kind of have this already planned out there to throw there into chat, is which of these stands out? Which of these would be something you would add to? You would add to another known characteristic to look at in adult learners, which would be one of these that might appeal to you to study a little bit more within your classroom or within your program. So throw some of those attributes or those things that you'd like to dive into a little bit deeper there in the chat. And Charlie's got some questions here for you too. Charlie, do you have a definitive question you wanted to kind of ask them a little bit?
Yeah, I do. I'm going to give them just a second to respond, but I mean, just the fact that knowing your students is such a key, one of the obviously 6 retention anchors we have. One of the questions that I wanted to ask is kind of that practical aspect of what do you do to actually get to know your students? I mean, there's a lot of different things that teachers do. And so that's the question I wanted to post, is just kind of bringing it back to that practical application of what do you do as a teacher, as a program, as an organization to get to know your students? It's pretty simple, but I'd love for people to post specific things they do, share their ideas in the chat.
Thanks, Charlie. This was something, and I see a lot of people kind of throwing out some ideas about things that they'd like to go deeper on. I see a lot talking about results oriented. That became a really big part of our discussion, and we'll touch on some of those things as we get a little bit deeper in these 6 anchors. And I should say right off the bat, I'm teasing this a little bit, that all of this research, all of this information, all of this collaboration has landed us with a culminating project of a retention guide that we are going to be providing for you. Surprise, surprise, if you're part of the PLC, you didn't know this was coming. We're going to be providing that resource for you today. It is a robust document that dives into each of these 6 anchors and provides information that all of these hardworking educators and administrators looked at over the course of this last year. So you'll be able to flesh out these 6 different categories, kind of answer some of those questions or different things that you want to dive into. So I want to tell you right off the bat, we're not just going to talk about what we've done. We're going to show you some of those real results. And for those of you that love them, it's got a whole section of reproducibles in the back. So have your copy code ready and get that copy machine ready, because we've got some activities for you to jump into as well. So this was that first of the 6 anchors. This, starting with this foundation of better understanding our students, having an idea, with the idea that we know that demographics are wonderful, they're fantastic, but there's always going to be nuances to that. There's always going to be exceptions to that rule. And we have to be very, very careful that we don't start to generalize too much, or we don't start to, label things too much, that we're really invested in that personal experience. So as we looked at our second anchor, we started looking to answer that question. Okay, well, how do my students learn best? What is going to fit their need now? And we kind of looked at 2 different angles of this. We looked at an emerging concept from business that now has transferred over to education in the form of just-in-time learning. And the general idea, quick response, is that just-in-time learning tries to give people just what they need in that moment in these bite-sized pieces so that they can keep moving forward. We know that that's difficult when every single one of those students might need something different at that given time. So we looked at just-in-time learning, but as we did, it took us down a trail that we didn't necessarily expect in the beginning. And we camped out in some neuroscience. That's not really my jam, but it became my jam, because we started thinking, okay, well, what is just-in-time learning? How do students know that they're learning? How do we know that they're getting it? And we started talking about the concept of aha moments and just-in-time learning strategies. And we're going to share some of those in the guide, some things that our students were able to experience through our educators and administrators in the PLC. What sets the stage for those aha moments? And so we had some clear takeaways. We looked at 3 primary characteristics of just-in-time learning. We know that it needs to be immediate. We need to have those students see that there in the moment. We know that just-in-time learning requires lessons and instruction that's predictive. How do we predict that? How do we predict what our students need? We go back to those demographics. We go back to knowing our students and getting to know what they need. Then we can plan for predictive instruction. We looked at how just-in-time learning is targeted, that it does now, once we have uncovered those needs, we predicted what they need, then we can start to target that with some very personalized learning. We looked at collective research that highlights 6 effective elements of just-in-time learning that set the stage for these aha moments. Mood and excitement. This became a really big talking point, that the classroom mood that you set, as many Gen Zs would call it, the vibe when you walk into that room, that level of excitement was really a conduit for just-in-time learning, for these aha moments. Sharing ideas, that goes back to that relationship factor and some of the things that we'll touch on in a little bit, that promoted some of that just-in-time learning. Background knowledge, making sure that your students have what they need in order to react, in order to interact with the information that you're presenting? Do you need to back that up? Do you need to provide some of that background knowledge? What does that look like? We looked at the speed of instruction and opportunities to move students forward and then to go back and to review. And we looked at the element of student reflection, giving them time to look back over what they've done, to look back over how they have progressed. And again, we'll touch on this in a little bit. I don't want to give too much away. We looked a lot at what that progress looks like and how do we measure and track that progress. And I love it. Somebody just put there in the chat, the classroom should be safe and welcoming. It's funny that you bring that up because that's exactly a perfect segue for where we are going. So we looked at this collective research for these elements of just-in-time learning. And one of the biggest that we found, after we've set a great mood, after we have promoted interactions and lessons that allow that sharing of ideas, that provide background knowledge, give opportunities for review and reflection, we started talking about the fact that maybe the aha moment is not necessarily the light bulb that we associate it with in our head. How many people got the picture when you say aha, that light bulb, you know, that little cartoon light bulb that pops above your head? We started thinking about it more as an aha moment. Instead of that light bulb, it's that dimmer switch of, I might not get this the first time, but if you show it to me a couple of other times, again, that slower but deeper adult learning characteristic, that repetition can set the stage for those aha moments. So we kind of have to reframe that. We kind of have to give ourselves a break, give our students a break. It might not click the first time. For many, it might. We might just hit that sweet spot, but others, they need that repetition to build up into that. So Charlie, throw out your next question for looking at what our students need.
Yeah, the question for Anchor 2 I had was just with the elements that you mentioned, has anyone applied any of those? Is there anything that they've done that's resembled some of those just-in-time learning elements? And if so, what's that looked like?
I'll
So
go
the-
back so we can review that. You know, as Charlie said, has anybody done anything, or they want to share any ideas that they had to set that mood or excitement? Do you have anything that you've done to build in shared ideas or student reflection? We would love to hear those. The chat for these webinars is very, very helpful because it's an extension of the PLC, because we know when we come together and collaborate, some really amazing things can happen. So
Hey,
share those there in the chat.
Hey, Jen, there was a question earlier. A few educators in the chat had asked about how do some of these results and research that you have here, how does that apply to ESL learners?
Yeah, so one of the things that I was really happy, and I've also, Charlie, now that you said that, I saw a lot of questions about corrections institutions there. We kind of had just like this amazing lightning in a bottle aspect to this professional learning community, in that we had specific members of the corrections community, we had specific members of the ESL community, we had specific members of migrant communities, and we were able to gather a lot of their perspectives. And that ESL component goes into that diversity for sure, and it lends itself to a whole other aspect of a different avenue to get to know your students and to bring some of those things into the classroom. So I think you'll enjoy some of the highlights and some of the things that that group will share there in the retention guide, geared to both of those things. I was really very pleasantly surprised that we didn't necessarily seek to focus on those individual pockets of the adult student population, but ESL and corrections really, really rose to the table as having very unique needs. So as we continue on and look at then this next anchor, we talked about creating culture. And this is that proverbial question of where our students learn. And someone there threw in the chat, students need to feel safe and comfortable. And that's one of the things that we found. We found that first we must identify what ideal classroom culture looks like. We talked about non-negotiables, this idea of, if you were at a restaurant and you heard someone talking about your classroom or your program, what would you want them to say? What would you never want them to say? And we took them through some of these basic culture building activities. and we took them through activities to survey their students. And I think you will be very, very surprised at some of their results. I know they were very surprised at some of the things they thought were happening in their classroom, but they had a different viewpoint and a different perspective on, and all of these opened up some really, really amazing avenues. Targeted culture-driven goals create an outline for program improvement. There again, that's that word targeted. We could put in the word intentional there, that once we have this information, we've got to figure out what we're going to do with it. And, you know, as Charlie's been asking there in the chat, what do those practical applications look like? Because we find that a lot of times, and I hate it, but we're doing a little bit of it today just to kind of show some of these overall takeaways. A lot of times we talk around issues and we say, okay, you know, that we understand that, we can empathize with that, but now what do we do? What can I start trying in my classroom? And that's what this initiative allowed us to do. And I think you'll be encouraged by their findings and some of the things they'll encourage you to try in your classrooms. Collective input from all members of a learning community is foundational in establishing culture. What does that mean? It means, as a program director, from the first person that interacts with that student in that onboarding, intake, greeting, orientation, whatever you might call it, process, to who they interact with collecting that data, who they interact with then as their educator in the classroom, who they interact with in that learning cohort, their peers, and then who they interact with that's driving the mission and vision of that program. Collective input from all members of that learning community, getting their perspectives, getting their goals, what they'd like to see that experience be, is really, really foundational. And we've given you some tools in the guide to make that happen. Environments that support student safety must be prioritized. And this is something we could camp out in. And in fact, we are. So one of the things that we'll link you to at the end of our webinar today are some wonderful professional development opportunities that Charlie and I have devised across the board at Essential Education. And the first one we will be diving into is that element of student safety. And of course, physical safety, we're talking about that. But we're talking about emotional safety. We're talking about that minimum thing that has to happen in order for students to have that level of comfort, in order for them to return to an environment. And we're really building off one statement: scared students don't come to class. If they don't feel a level of comfort, there's a big chunk of your retention right there. Contextualized learning is essential to effective classroom culture. That hits that word engagement that some people were throwing out there in the chat. So we talked about ways to better contextualize that based on what we know about our students and based on what we know about their needs. Each of these anchors is a throwback to the other. Each works in concert with the other, just like anchoring that ship. One depends on the other for that full strength and that full solidification. Positive learning environment is powerful. There's a great deal of research out there that talks, again, going back to that mood, going back to that excitement, that positivity is powerful. And we at the forefront there in the classroom, or again, that person that greets them into the program, that welcomes them into the program, you have the opportunity to set the tone for that. Classroom climate that is safe and conducive to learning with positive rapport among all participants is essential for adult learners. So the key words there are that classroom climate, something that is safe and reactive to learning with that positive aspect from all participants. So that became kind of the overarching elements of building this culture in. Charlie, what question did you want to throw out here as far as a practical application for folks to answer there in the chat?
Yeah, pretty straightforward. What's one thing you do to create a positive classroom culture? We've got a few in the chat. Someone was talking about adopting new students into the kind of the class family. So yeah, I would love to hear other kind of practical things that you as a teacher, or if you're an admin or program director, if there's things you do across a program that help to build that positive, safe culture. Model acceptance we're seeing, greet each person, student by name. It's been good.
I see that, and I like the variety there, Charlie, that I see in the chat, because some of it is that what I would put into the more touchy-feely category, and some of it is a little bit more pen to paper, that we are supporting our students with the culture when we surround them with elements to track their progress, when we surround them with that level of expectation and how they can work toward their goals. And Tish asked a question there in the chat. I saw that pop up. What about those younger students? What about the 16, 17, 18 students? I am so glad you threw that out there and asked that question. One of the things that we were able to do in this guide is to break up some things generationally. That Gen Z group right there is the one that is going to grow. They are already a big group of our big part of our adult education demographic, that learning community, but that generation and all of the unique things, all of those characteristics will then become the bulk of that demographic over the next 5 to 10 years. And that's something we need to pay attention to. So one of the things we were able to do within the research was a deep dive into what some of these concepts look like specifically for Gen Z and specifically for 30 plus students. So I think you'll enjoy that. You can kind of, look at some of those different things that affect what your personal classroom looks like. All right, Charlie, anything else in there that stands out to you before we move on?
A couple people have mentioned food. Yeah, just taking time for the students to get to know each other, or acknowledging them basically as humans and giving them a chance to talk a little bit, it sounds like. But yeah, a lot of good stuff here.
Absolutely. So keep that chat going, keep those comments and those questions coming. So then we move to then the fourth anchor. Here we get into what I will go to the mattresses for, so to speak, that is a hill I will climb and stand on. It is my soapbox. Relationships are the glue of student retention. All the things we've talked about so far are setting the stage to build real connections with our students. And that looks a million and one different ways different for me than it might look for you, that it might look for the teacher sitting next to you. It looks very different in the way you build relationships from the teacher across the hall from you, because they are so hinged not on necessarily the personalities in the classroom, but the things that you do to interact with those personalities and to build those relationships. And just like Charlie was saying, we want to come away with these practical applications. Within the guide, you're going to hear a lot of information from the folks that were a part of our professional learning community that really, really contributed to, hey, try this. I'm going to throw this out there. I'm going to see what happens when I do this with my students. What connection am I able to make with this activity or this instructional element? So I really encourage you to dive into that. Students excel when they feel known and cared for by their teacher. It's researched, proven over and over and over again. And I will go so far as to see known and cared for as to say seen, just recognized. There's a generational expert that I love, Tim Elmore, and he looked to neurological research that shows brains firing at near identical levels to someone that all of a sudden feels seen and known than to someone that feels a sense of deep love. They spike. The love tends to be, a little bit more consistent, because hopefully that's there and that's a consistent emotion, a consistent feeling. But when you are known and seen and someone cares for you, it spikes. And I think, unfortunately, the way our society has evolved, we have such a low bar for what it takes to be in a relationship with somebody, what it takes to be seen, that even small little changes that you make in your day can make a huge impact in how your students feel seen and how they feel known. Positive student to teacher relationships to improve instruction. That's been proven statistically over and over and over again. Teacher retention. This is really something that we found. It shouldn't have been a surprise, but one of the things we found in research is that teacher retention increases when students establish those strong bonds with their students. They're more invested. You're more invested when you know something is going to hit. When you're planning that lesson and you think to yourself, oh, I know Christina wants to see this today. Ooh, I know this is gonna hit her. Your level of involvement, your level of investment changes. And someone's asking a great question there in chat, and we actually address that in this group and in the guide, with corrections needing to be very careful about what types of relationships that you establish with students. One of the people that I will get to recognize today is very, very connected in her corrections community. She is working and teaching in the corrections community, and she had to overcome some of those challenges there as well in setting those boundaries, because you can be in a relationship with someone and still set very healthy boundaries. It's, you know, it's the same thing as that you're in relationship with your child, but hopefully you're not your child's friend. You're still their parent. So those boundaries in and of themselves set expectation and set you up for success. So there are ways to cultivate those relationships. And again, they look very different for each and every one of us, depending on our students, our structure, and even our own personality. Peer collaboration and student progress are very tightly aligned. This is something we are going to do a deep dive in professional development offerings at Essential Education at the end of February, because this arose statistically over and over and over again, that peer relationships are just as strong as the student to teacher relationship, if not more so. So there's a lot of great research in the guide that you can point to with that, and some activities that our PLC will share to support that. Educator collaboration is powerful. You wouldn't be here in a webinar participating in the chat if some part of you did not believe that, if you didn't believe that you were going to learn more from talking to another educator, if you didn't know that you were going to learn more by just being vulnerable enough to ask that question, what can I do? Am I doing something wrong? What do I need to do this right? And when those barriers come down, you set the acronyms and the teacher speak aside, and you start to have real conversations with other educators. There are powerful things that can happen. If an adult does not feel that they are part of a group, it will impact their learning. It will impact their desire to stay in class, whether in a physical classroom or a virtual online session. Forming and maintaining relationships will improve student retention. And for those of you that might be wondering, I didn't see this pop up in the chat, I could have missed it. Well, how do I build relationships with my online students? What does that look like? Again, we were fortunate enough to have a good contingency of folks that are fully or online, or they're blended learners that contributed to this conversation and have some ideas to share with you as well. So Charlie, you want to throw out a question for this one, getting connected?
I sure can. Really, it's kind of an either or choose which one you want to answer. But basically, what are some specific things you've done to foster relationships with your students, or how have you helped peer-to-peer relationships grow? So if you have any specific things that you've done, I know some people have been sharing things already in the chat, but any other specific or practical ideas to help those grow, by all means, share those here.
Great. I see some really, really great things coming in. Again, that's just showing that collaborative element that's there that we cherish, definitely. All right, so as we look to then that fifth anchor, where I'm trying to give you guys some overview, but we're going to be cognizant of time here as well. Measuring progress. How does measuring progress, and then the second part, celebrating gains, lead to retention? And we really did a deep dive here. One of the things that we had a very lively discussion about was the difference between quantitative and qualitative data and the value of each, the drawbacks of one or the other. And we really found that they need to work in concert with each other. Multiple forms of assessment help to create a clearer picture of student success. Student-friendly tracking tools improve motivation and engagement. That's a nod to that students want control over their learning. They want to be more autonomous when they have tools where they can track, know how much time they've studied that week, know what they scored on their last practice test. They have elements to that. Even that in and of itself is a wonderful, wonderful way to connect with your students. When you're able to have those one-on-one conversations and encourage them and celebrate and let them know that it's not just about perfection, that their progress matters, that really, really hits that adult learning need to see that their results are paying off. Because I don't know if this is something that you see a lot, but I think a lot of us as humans do this in general, and I've definitely seen this in the adult student community. well, I didn't pass my practice test again. I guess I failed. That statement, if I didn't pass, I failed, is rarely true. It's probably never true, depending on how we look at it. But having those conversations with students that say, yeah, you took this practice test for the GED, you didn't get a 145, but you got a 142. What did you get before that? Well, I got a 138. What'd you get before that? Well, I got a 130. And being able to show that progress, to show those gains. It might not be that ultimate prize, but it's, somebody put this in the chat earlier, it's that grit, it's that determination. And they need to see that if I keep coming to class, this is going to pay off over time, because it may not be an aha experience. It may be an aha experience. Data-driven instruction is invaluable. We have to have it. We have to use it. We have to apply it, and we have to reflect on it. And that set the basis for our professional learning community. We see the problem. We want to learn more about it. We want to do a deeper dive into how we can address some of those things. Then we got to throw it out. We got to see if it's going to work. And we learned just as much, if not more, from the things that did not work as the things we were successful in. So data-driven, all data is valuable. All student gains should be celebrated. We can't just continue to look at that overall. Yes, we need to do that. We need to look at, when our students pass their individual subject exams, we need to celebrate. We need to have those GED graduations. We need to have all of those big moments. But we also need to get in practice of celebrating all those little things that build up to that, and having our students own that is really, really important. We had a whole slew of wonderful ideas about how to celebrate your students, and many of them are not too far off from something we might have experienced in K-12. And I'll just say that the quote was made, stickers are powerful. The power of the sticker. And I think what comes behind that is one of the things, and I have to be careful about how I can say this because I'll get very emotional when I talk about it. We have the opportunity to redeem some very negative past experiences for some of our students. Those students that never got the recognition, those students that never got to pick out of the prize box in 4th grade, and it's still something they think about. We get opportunities to redeem that and to value that. It is essential when considering, oops, I didn't get to read that. It is essential when considering evaluation that the core purpose is a collection of data that informs us how to best aid our students in learning, and more specifically in learning the skills that they need to reach their goals. We could talk about transferable skills all day long. I am very, very passionate just about helping students identify those skills. There are a lot of our students that walk around feeling like they don't have skills. Well, I didn't really do that. I didn't really have that job. I didn't really earn that certification. I haven't gotten my high school equivalency yet, so I don't have skills. And then you get to talk to them about their lives and their backgrounds, and they're explaining to you how they're trying to manage a household and make ends meet and work 2 jobs and still get to class and care for their older family members while they're juggling a million and one other things. And our opportunities to step into that, to show them their organizational skills and their time management skills, and then tie that to how they can channel that into their day-to-day studies, into their day-to-day to what they do, is really, really powerful. And you'll see some of those results from the PLC as well. Oh, I got ahead of myself, Charlie. Anything there? I see some things coming in about quantitative and qualitative. Anybody have any things that they want to share? And Charlie's going to throw out another question.
That's it. Just how do you communicate and celebrate progress with your students? And a lot of people are already sharing those things. So any other thoughts or ideas, drop those in the chat. Specific things you do to, could be communicate progress, or obviously it could be celebrate. Kind of similar, but maybe a little different. So.
Gotcha. I'm seeing shout out board come in there. Love that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Good stuff.
Yeah, you're right. Someone just put, sometimes progress can be that they just came to class that day. And you will see some results from the PLC where there were some educators that was the element of those 7 key characteristics of educators that they dove into. They looked at adults are busy, and that they really looked into, hey, why are they busy? What makes them busy? What is the #1 reason why my students are missing class? And they tracked it together. as a class in an old-fashioned chart of sorts that they had there on the board. Then they had different little emojis that they popped in for their reasons for missing class, and they were able to kind of narrow down some of those things. And you'll not only be equipped with the information from the guide on that experiment, you'll be given some tools to do an experiment like that on your own. So it's really important to look at those individual strands of things as well. Yep, a wall where they can add their name, candy, music, all of those things. All of those things are really, really motivating. We can't write it off. We can't get into our head that we have to have these big celebratory incentives to go along with the big celebrations. Maybe we need to kind of adjust our thinking to think, okay, I can celebrate this in small ways along the way. And even just an encouraging word can be more powerful than we think. So as we look at this last anchor, and we've kind of pushed into this the whole time, and the project in and of itself became the manifestation of the strength of this anchor, and that's growing professionally. The ability for teachers and educators, administrators, program directors to come together in professional development to have real conversations and to let professional development be what it's intended to be. And we can all be really honest that some professional development is better than others. And so we looked at why that's the case. We looked at why teacher education and student performance are intertwined. We looked at professional development opportunities that promote teacher continuance. Not only things that as I'm developing myself, I'm moving these things and I'm finding ways to engage and retain my students, but maybe those professional developments are opportunities for you to stick with it, for you to stay in the battle, to fight the good fight, all of those things. Professional development can come along with that. But one of the things that we found in our research is that there aren't a lot of go-to standards when it comes to selecting or facilitating professional development. That's why we have that spectrum of professional developments that were out of the box fantastic, and then ones that landed flat. Maybe it could just be that it didn't fit our needs, or wasn't, exactly our vibe or our flavor, our jam, however we want to say that. It didn't speak to our needs, like that just-in-time learning. But we realized that there's overall kind of a disconnect in what makes for key and important and valuable professional development. And so we looked at the Every Student Succeeds Act, started as a K-12 initiative. It's still there. There are some other efforts. I believe Adult Literacy Association has some standards that they've developed for adult student professional development. But we liked how these were a little bit more concise. And they showed us that in order for professional development to be effective, it needs to have an element where it's sustained, it's over a period of time, where it's intensive, it's looking at one particular thing, one particular problem, it's collaborative, it has those multiple voices that come in together. It's job embedded, meaning that it's using things that you are using on the day-to-day. This could be a curriculum, an instruction, getting more training on the curriculum that you already have, getting more training on some of the technology that you have in place so that it's already embedded, it's targeted into what you're doing every day. It's data-driven. Again, we cannot, as much as we might get lost in some of those numbers on the spreadsheet, we've got to find a way to embrace that, because that data in its numerical form and that data in its qualitative form, what you're seeing in observations, what your students are sharing with you, the facial expression that they have when they're checking out or they're engaged, all of that data is good data. And it drives what really is the heart of professional development, because it tells us what we need to focus on. That it is classroom focused, that a key element of good professional development, it is allowing these things that Charlie is trying in the midst of time today to bring us back to those particulars, to bring us back to those positive, practical applications that we can bring in our classroom. Because I think many of us have gone to an array of professional development, again, where we talk really high level, but we don't, because of time constraints or whatever obstacles we're facing, we aren't getting into the real nitty gritty of that. And so that is, again, another reason why we knew at Essential Education, as we were tackling this big problem of retention, we knew that it was something we couldn't address in a 30-minute webinar. We knew it was something that we couldn't even, in our own humility, address in and of ourselves. We needed to collaborate with people, with you out there that are seeing these things in your classroom, because that's where the real data is coming from. Quality professional development is planned, reflective, and applicable. It allows us to look forward at what we need to do, to try some things, to look back and reflect, evaluate, and then go back and do it again and apply those things. Educators need timely tools. We need just-in-time learning. We need to have those aha moments. Charlie and I were talking about a different subject earlier today, and I said, I have heard this statement. I have seen this concept a million times, but I went to a webinar a couple months ago. The way the speaker presented it, but it was within a couple of sentences, hit me in a way that will fundamentally change the way that I proceed in relationships with students. It will fundamentally change what I view in positive classroom climate. I needed that information just in time in that way. And so we need that as well when we look at professional development. So I encourage you, jump into the guide, look at what some people found, look at these criteria, especially if you're at your organization in a position to choose professional development, try applying some of these. You may not hit all of them. It might be impossible for one professional development opportunity to hit all of these things, but take them into account as a value quotient when you're choosing that professional development, because what you're developing in yourself and applying in the classroom has direct ties to retention. Charlie, you got a question for him here?
Yeah, I do. Let me go back to my other screen. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Yeah, basically, if there's what learning or training have they attended that's helped them with student retention, or if there's been some feature of a training that they feel has been most impactful. So I can put that in the chat, but if you feel like there was something that you went to recently in the last year or two that was really helpful, or again, thinking more big picture, is there a model or a type of training or learning that seems to be most helpful for you?
That's great. Even if it's something specific to your area, we've got people that are joining us from all over the US. I even saw some international in there. So if you've got something in your area that is something that has been really helpful for you, throw that into the chat too, because you don't know who might be there, and that's what they need to see today. So keep those things coming. For time purposes, we're going to keep on moving. And I get to introduce this today. I'm so excited. Before some earlier events today, I thought I was just going to get to tease this guide and give you, we've got 3 chapter samples that we put out over the course of the last year. But I am so happy to put this in your hands today. And surprise, surprise, if you are a member of our PLC, it's out. Your baby has been birthed. It's been launched. It's here. All of your hard work over the last year and everything we've done over the last 18 months has culminated into this. And we're so proud. And I think I speak for the group when I say this, not necessarily proud of the work that we've done, although that you should be, that's definitely there, the time, the hours, the effort. I'm proud of what we saw in each other, because it was incredibly encouraging to see the heart of adult educators, to see what you are bringing to the table, to be able to have those moments that say, I'm not always doing this perfectly, so I need help, I need to learn, I need to grow, and I'm here. I'm showing up for the ones that show up. And that kind of became a mantra for our group as we went along. So the retention guide is here. It is linked here in its digital form. In this, you'll get the presentation. All of those things will come through. It's linked here, but then Charlie's also going to put a link to that guide. If you are attending the COABE conference, which we hope all of you are, you can get that hard copy of the guide, so you have those reproducibles there at the end. But without further ado, we want to, of course, give you some resources from us. We've got some wonderful professional development opportunities coming up. Got some wonderful resources on our website. We've got a retention toolkit where you can see those samplers. You've got all those things. And then we really want to invite you to our Tuesdays with Essential Education. We are bulking up that offering. We are no longer offering that once every other month. We are offering it 3 times a month, every month. So you'll be able to join us and we'll be able to get down into some of those strands within our time together. I got to call out my people. I am beyond excited to let you know who our adult education retention specialists are. COABE, again, has been a wonderful, we could not have asked for a better partner in this, and they have so graciously given these hardworking educators their stamp of approval. The 13 folks that you will see, I'm going to talk about each of them a little bit, worked very, very hard. They, and I don't think they'd mind me sharing this, at least in an overall format, they faced incredible personal and professional hardships along the way. You can imagine what happens in a year over the course of a life. You can imagine what happens in a year over the course of an adult education program. But you can imagine what happens when you can share those things with each other and you can break down that wall between us and them, so that's not even a part of our vernacular, so that we can lean into some of those hard things that we're going through, sharing those things with our students and walking through that with them. And I could give you examples for each and every person that you see here that have earned this credential in a way that they use their own personal struggle or personal celebration, that both of those things came along the way, to connect deeply with their students. And deep means different things to different people. Maybe it's just you finally got something out of that student that hasn't talked the entire semester, but they were able to connect with them in different ways because we were able to connect with each other in different ways. So from the great state of Alabama, I know she's here today, Christina Smith. We want to recognize her. She's doing amazing work down there at Goodwill Gulf Coast. From Arizona, we've got Nikki Neal, who is there in Santa Cruz County. She's in their continuing education program. Want to recognize her. Bill Queese out in California, instructional lead teacher there at South Bay Adult School. In Kansas showed up with 2 that got this. So if you're in the great state of Kansas, then you've got a couple of specialists there in your area. We got Kelly Gradowski, wonderful site director there at Orion. And if you are looking for a partner in arms in corrections, look no further than LaDonna Torrey. She brought just a wonderful, wonderful element of that ABE corrections slant idea, struggles uniquely to this group that I really want to praise and celebrate her for. In Maine, we've got Cherie. She's up there as an academic coordinator at Bonnie Eagle. Actually, she's not at, is she? Yes, she is at Bonnie Eagle. At Bonnie Eagle up there, and they did some wonderful things. And she brought a unique perspective again as that academic coordinator, because she's looking at things from a different way, from a different perspective. In Maryland, we have Cha brought a lot of things from our immigrant culture, some of that ESL perspective that came in there from her work there at Prince George's Community College. Thank you, Cha. Tracy Reed, tutoring lab coordinator there at SUNY and Syracuse, brought a wonderful perspective about what it really looks like to have a revolving door as a tutoring lab coordinator. You can imagine that there's a lot of activity there, both in and out. And Tracy brought some great work to the project there. Susan Spradlin in Tennessee, she's lead instructor there at Tennessee College of Applied Technology, gave us some really, really interesting ways to look at contextualized education and how to apply some career-based instruction into GED and other ABE offerings. Esther Garcia, known as the party queen at Party Central there in Texas. GED instructor is just not enough to call this individual. In fact, she is joining us today from Disneyland. Her dream trip of going to, is Disney World or Disneyland? I'm getting them mixed up. She's joining us today, and the work that she does at Catholic Charities there is unbelievable. You will be encouraged by some of her student stories, to say the least. I have yet to read one without crying. So thank you, Esther, for all of your contributions. There, Tammy in Virginia, we're so thankful for you, what you're doing at Waynesboro Public High School, and what you had to contribute to the group as well. Lyle Ring, If you want data, if you want research, if you want a way to organize that, look no further than Lyle Ring, who brought a lot to the table. He shared a lot of his documents that you will see there in the reproducibles in the guide. So Lyle, thank you for what you're doing there at Berea in Washington, D.C. And our international representative from Bermuda, we had Dr. Nalitha Butterfield, who is the director of the program there. She had some very, very difficult life circumstances, but what she brought to the table and the way in which she connected with our group was really, really incredible. And oh my gosh, perhaps she'll be able to share more about her story one day, because it's incredible. We celebrate you. We are so, so thankful for the work that you did this year. We can't thank you enough. And again, that pride comes not just from what we gathered and what we collected, but what we get to share in this guide and what we get to share in our stories. So Charlie, got any questions that'll allow me to kind of grab some tissues here for a little bit?
No, not exactly. Everyone's just saying thank you and they appreciated the session. I posted the link to the retention guide again in the chat. But yeah, we really appreciate you all sharing here in the chat. We love to have our sessions, obviously with COABE, and the ones we do ourselves be very interactive and personal and personable. So obviously we know that we're not the sole source of all the information, and that you all are in the trenches doing a lot of awesome work, and we love to highlight that and obviously give you all a platform to share that with each other as well. So thank you for participating with us today.
Absolutely. And Charlie, we should shamelessly plug our 3-hour half-day presentation there at COABE. If you really want to dig into some of these resources, we're going to walk through some of these activities that the PLC did. We're going to walk through some of these things, these discussions that we had there in a half-day offering there at COABE. And we would really love to see you join us, because we can only get to the tip of the iceberg in this 1-hour time that we've had together today. We celebrate our partnership with COABE. We could not have done this without you. We celebrate those that are now COABE certified adult retention specialists. Enjoy that honor, celebrate that honor, because we celebrate you. And I think we're 3 minutes over our time. I was getting a little nervous there in the end. So thank you. If you've got continued things you want to ask there in the chat, we'll keep that open just for a little bit. But we're so excited to have you. And I think we just put up a webinar poll about today's time together. So go ahead and jump into that. That's always helpful. But thank you so much for joining us. We hope to have the opportunity to connect with you at COABE or in your organization, in your offering there, whether you're with Essential Education or you just want to learn more about what we do, what we get to do, then we want to connect with you in that regard as well.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Charlie. Thanks everyone for joining us. If you could allow about 24 hours, you'll receive your certificate for the webinar, as well as the webinar recording and the resources. So everyone have a great afternoon, and thanks again to our partners at Essential Ed. It's always great to have them with us, and come see them at the COABE conference. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.